Assalamu alaikum, shalom, peace and blessings, everyone. Welcome to Universal God, Message of Peace. I'm Lale Tuncer. This is Rabbi Lee Weissman and Dr. Khalid Zaheer. And this week we'll be continuing our topic of righteous hatred. Is righteous hatred justifiable? So last week, Dr. Zaheer made some really amazing, powerful points, which started with yes, but. And then we had some comments from Rabbi Weissman suggesting that perhaps he might be talking about more in the times of no but. So this week we'll be hearing more about the no but perspective, God willing, and then we'll have some questions and comments afterwards. So over to you, Rabbi Weissman. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm going to say that I think that in the end, I think that Dr. Zaheer and I both ended up kind of in the no but neighborhood. But let's start. I'm gonna start with a story. I like to start with stories. So the story is about Rabbi Meir, and he was a rabbi who lived in the first century in Israel, Palestine, and he was his wife walked into the house one day and found him holding a chicken between his knees. Okay, a rooster between his knees. Now, what you need to know about roosters is that in the ancient world, if you didn't have an alarm clock, you got yourself a rooster, right? Because the rooster as soon as it was dawn, right, the rooster would crow. So he was holding this chicken in order to get the time right, okay? Because he knew that exactly at sunrise, right, exactly at dawn, right, the chicken would crow, and at that moment he was able to do some kind of curse. Some kind of curse. Now he had a neighbor who he didn't like. He had a neighbor who was annoying and so forth, and he wanted to curse the neighbor. So his wife, whose name was Baruria, she was in herself also a famous scholar. She's mentioned many times in the Talmud as offering her opinions, things. A very interesting person. So she walked in and she sees him like this, right, holding this rooster between his knees, clearly waiting, holding the alarm clock, waiting for something to happen. She says, "What are you doing?" He says, I'm going to curse that neighbor of ours." And she says, "No, no, 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 no." He says, "You never curse the neighbor. Never curse the sinner, only curse the sin." Right? You cannot like what the person did, right? But to curse the person, that's very wrong. And I would say that's our overall perspective. And very much got that from Dr. Zaheer last week, and I'm going to agree with it that there's a very big difference between what a person does and and who a person is. And so to hate a person to hate what someone does, there may be a benefit in that. That's going to be the but after the no. But when it comes to hating who someone is, that's going to be a pretty solid no. That's where the solid no is. The solid no comes in hating where someone is. In fact, there is a there is a very direct prohibition in the Torah that says you shall not hate your brother in your heart. Even meaning to say that even if you don't act on it, even if it's something that you're never going to act on, the very fact of your having those feelings, um, that could lead to action, that's already a problem, right? That's already a problem. Now, you'll notice I said your brother. And of course, this always causes a lot of problems because then the question is, to quote the Gospels of Jesus, who is your brother, right? Who is that? Who is that referring to? Are you saying, well, I have to, I can't hate people who are like me, right? But I could maybe hate people who are not like me, right? That's one possibility, one way that people do understand that. Or does it mean that all of humanity is my brother? After all, we are all descended, right, from, well, all descended from one couple. We are all related to each other, right? We're all part of one human family. So that's another way of understanding it, that your brother is your brother human being. Is it your brother in religion? Is it your brother in culture? Is it your brother in language? Is it so I would suggest, if you're asking me, the broader you draw that circle, the better. Okay, the broader you draw the circle of who is your brother, the better it is for you. Because the idea that somehow or another I'm going to be, and I'm not going to hate the people who are like me, but then I'm going to be able to sort of turn off that hate when it comes to people who are like me, I think doesn't work very well. I think once you become in the habit of hating people, it's difficult to get out of that habit. So that's where we get a solid no. And the solid no is supported by a perspective that hatred is just bad for um, is really bad for the personality. If you look in the book of Proverbs, it says hatred stirs up conflict, right? That when people hate, it creates all sorts of conflict in the world. It's not good for societies. Um, but love covers up wrongs, right? The opposite of hatred, which is love, is very good for society, right? It allows people to be able to live smoothly, even though we're not perfect. It helps us to deal with each other's imperfections, and has a solid benefit. So and the beginning, and if we look at the beginning of the Torah, right, the stories beginning of the Torah, most of which are repeated, I think all of which are repeated in the Quran, we can see the effects of hatred, right? We have the very first, right? We have the very first pair of sons, um, who are called in the Torah, Cain and Hevel, and I forget what are they called in the Quran.
Habil and Qabil.
Habil and Qabil, right? Who have a conflict with each other, and so from the beginning of humanity, already we have one brother who kills the other. We have the story of Joseph and his brothers, and how that causes all sorts of events and so forth to come into play, and what we see also interesting there is, on the one hand, we have the brothers, right? We have the brothers who hate Joseph and who punish him, and we have Joseph, who doesn't take that out on his brothers later. He doesn't hate his brothers back, right? And on the contrary, when they're afraid of him because he's now a person of great power, right? What does he say to them? He says, "This was not in my hands. This was not in your hands. This was in God's hands, and this is what happened. Okay, I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to take it out on you." And so he shows a kind of mature approach to what happens when a person hates you. Um, Now, when we come to the yes part, there are verses. Um, so so I'll quote one uh, from uh, I'll quote one from Tehillim, from the book of Psalms, and one from the book of Amos. So what in the book of Psalms it says, "Let those who love the Lord hate evil, for he guards the lives of his faithful ones, delivers them from the hands of the wicked." Okay, now what's interesting about the verse is he says, "Let those who love the Lord hate evil," right? It doesn't say hate those who do evil. And in fact, he mentions the wicked later. He says that he'll be delivered from the hands of the wicked, but he doesn't say you should hate the wicked, actually. He says you should hate the evil. And again, in the book of Amos, another prophet, he says, hate evil, love good, maintain justice. Hate evil. So once again, not hate those who do evil. And it's interesting when we look at the Psalms of David, he very often talks about his enemies as haters. Right? I saw one. I went looking this morning in my morning prayers. Our morning prayers are about an hour of text. So that's about an hour of text that we look at every day. So I figured, oh, must be very important. Okay, I'm looking for hate. I was searching for hate today. Well, I found it once, only once. uh, the line was, my enemies hate me with a vicious hate. Okay, my enemies hate me with a vicious hate. So it was not David HaMelech saying, "Oh, I hate my enemies." It was him saying that my enemies hate me. And then I thought, "Oh, I wonder if that's a theme." And I went looking in Tehillim today. I went looking in the Psalms, and it happens again and again. Never does it say that he hates them. It always says that they hate him. So hating as a sign of wickedness, right? It's part of what makes you out of the will of God is to be a hater, right? Someone who hates as a matter of habit. That's part of it. So that's except, right, that one can hate evil, right? That's something. So to hate evil, to hate injustice. We have another. It says to hate robbery, to hate wrongdoing. So again, these are sins, not sinners, right? That concept from Beruria that I brought in at the very beginning seems to hold kind of solidly through the entire thing. I'm going to add one more piece. I want to add one more piece. There's a particular kind of hatred that um, that the rabbis rail against, that I think is very interesting and very misunderstood. And the Hebrew phrase for it is sinat chinam. So sinat means means hatred, and chinam means for free. Okay, free hatred, right? Free hatred. Now I'll explain what that means. So some people understand that as baseless hatred. And so we say that the second temple, so the second temple that was in Jerusalem was destroyed because of baseless hatred. That the punishment, right? That it was a punishment against baseless hatred, and that the exile of the Jewish people from the land of Israel, our dispersion into the world, and the suffering that came along with that, all of that is because of something which is called sinat chinam, or baseless hatred. Now, the problem with that interpretation is that no hatred is baseless, right? I have never met anybody who hates baselessly. There's always a reason, right? I don't like his nose, right? It's not a good reason, but it's a reason, right? I don't like his theology. I don't like his philosophy, right? I don't like the way he eats. I don't like the fact that he doesn't cut his lawn. I don't like there's always something. There's no case in the world I've ever heard of where somebody actually hates without some kind of basis. The basis may not be good, the basis may not be real, but there always is some kind of a basis. So the translation of that as baseless hatred, the people just hate each other for nothing. Well, yeah, that would be a horrible thing, but I don't think it happens. I don't think it happens. Even stranger is the Talmud tells a story to illustrate this baseless hatred. So I'm going to tell you the story. Okay? So you have to settle in because it's storytelling time. So once upon a time, there was a man who had a party. He had a big party, and he had a friend named you have to keep track of this. You may need to take notes. Okay, he had a friend named Kamsa, and he had an enemy named Bar Kamsa. Okay? So he told his servant, he says, listen, go invite my friend Kamsa to the wedding. So the servant got confused, and he invites Bar Kamsa, the enemy, to the wedding. So they're having the big wedding. Everybody's invited. There's a table full of rabbis in the front, right? The rabbis sitting there, looking rabbinical, and everybody's here. And all of a sudden, the guy who is having this party sees his enemy Bar Kamsa sitting at one of the tables, and he walks up to Bar Kamsa, and he says, "Get up, get out." And Bar Kamsa goes, "What? What? Who knows what Bar Kamsa thought? Bar Kamsa maybe thought that his enemy was trying to make friends with him, and he thought that this was, he got an invitation. He said, look, don't embarrass me. I'll tell you what, I'll pay for my dinner. Okay, I'll pay for my dinner. Just don't kick me out. And the guy says, no, get out of here. He says, look, I'll pay for half of the dinner for everybody. I'll pay for half of the entire wedding. Just don't embarrass me. Don't kick me out. I said, no, get out of here. He said, please, 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 please. He says, I'll pay for the entire wedding. I'll pay for everything, but don't embarrass me. Don't kick me out. He said, no. And he had two guys come in and pick him up and threw him out. And the rabbis were watching. The rabbis watched all this happening. So Bar Kamsa leaves and he's so angry. He just can't control himself. He's just so angry. And he comes up with this plan. And he brings this animal to be sacrificed to the Romans. And he connives this whole thing, right, to get the Romans to attack, right? And so the rabbis say, hey, this is why the temple was destroyed, because of Bar Kamsa, because of his baseless hatred, his sinat chinam. He said, wait a second, hold on. First of all, it's not sinat chinam. He has something to really be mad at, right? He's mad at, he has a lot to be mad at. He's mad at the person who kicked him out, but he's also mad at the rabbis, right? The rabbis sat there and watched this happen. They could have stood up and they said, listen, this is not a thing. We don't embarrass people at weddings and kick them out. This is not a thing that we do. Just let him stay. We'll pay for the dinner, right? They could have done something. They didn't do anything, right? Obviously, he had reason to be angry at the guy for kicking him out. He had a lot of reason to be angry, right? It was a humiliating situation. He had a reason to be angry. So what is the sinat chinam? So Rabbi David Foreman says something very, very interesting about this. He says that the chinam doesn't mean necessarily for nothing. It can mean something which is let loose. See, normally when we get angry, when we get upset, what do? Let's say that I have a problem with somebody. Okay, what do? I go home. Okay, I go home. I talk to my spouse. I talk to my best friend. I call my mother on the phone. My daughter actually called me today on the phone about something like this. So happens, right? You call your father on the phone and you say, "Can I whine for a minute?" That's what she said. And I said, yes. And she complained to me about something that happened to her and somebody was unfair and they did this and they did that and she wrote an article some people didn't like, and so they wrote her boss and they did all sorts of things, and she complained. That's what we normally do, right? Now, if on the other hand, when you're upset about something and you're angry about something and you're upset with somebody, you just let it go, right? You just let it go. You don't talk to anybody, right? You don't check yourself. You don't think to yourself, like what he could have thought of himself, what he could have said to himself. He could have had a little nice conversation with himself. He could have said, Bar Kamsa, obviously something went wrong. He does have a friend named Kamsa. Maybe they got confused and he got upset because he was expecting to see one guy or another. Okay, let it go. Or he could say, I'm going to go to that guy. I'll go yell at him, another time after the wedding. But right now, I'm not going to go to the Romans and get everybody killed, right, because of one person. And think about it. But he didn't do that. Instead, he just acted on his anger and hatred. He allowed that hatred free rein. Hatred is natural. right? It's part of us. And so the sin here is not that we have the hatred. The sin is that we allow it to grow, that we allow it to express itself in ways which are express itself in ways which are dangerous and destructive. And that we don't put the, so it's very important to know that this is part of our nature. These kinds of things happen between human beings, and that we can't let it loose, right? It's not something that we should allow ourselves to let it loose. So to kind of summarize what I said is, on the one hand, on the interpersonal, right, on the interpersonal level, um, to hate is very dangerous, and that if we hate, we should hate the sin. We should hate the sin and not we should hate the sin and not the sinner. We should hate those things. We should hate what people do, not what people are, and that we should make sure that hate is something which is kept in control. We shouldn't allow it. We shouldn't allow it free reign.
Mhm.
That even the times when we should have it, right? When it's reasonable to have it, we should keep it within its bounds, and exercise discipline over it. So I'll stop there. That's my contribution for the day.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. Thank you so much, Rabbi Weissman. Do you have any questions, Dr. Zaheer, for Rabbi Weissman, or comments that you'd like to make on?
Wow. There's a lot that he has actually mentioned, and it really is, it's deep, and it makes a lot of sense and gives a lot of insight. I I am now wiser, and he has given a lot of food for thought to ponder. Uh, let me based on what he has said, let me just reflect on a few points. One of them is the fact that what he said really is all making a lot of sense, and yet what we have in this world of ours is a lot of hatred, and it's not just hatred for evil; it's hatred for humans. Um, and there are a number of reasons, and I think the kind of insight that Rabbi Weissman has on issues, matters, uh, he can shed more light on it. One of the probably difficult um, reasons that create hatred, I'm saying difficult reasons in the sense that which is difficult to remove, is the hatred that some people have against others because of history, because of ancestors. I have hatred against somebody else. Maybe, I will be able to overcome it. Maybe I'll be able to help myself understand and realize that, you know, let's forgive, let's ignore. But if I am somehow convinced, for whatever reasons, that another person's grandfather killed my grandfather, I don't know why, that that hatred, it stays. And I think, there's a need to do something about it as well. Um, for instance, it always comes to my mind that, you know, uh, groups of people, nations, religious people, sects, etc., should actually talk about the fact that, what has happened has happened. Um, for one thing, we are not very sure what were the details. And for another, We were not there. We were not responsible for it. Let's move on. Let's talk about our present issues and come to the common areas, common points. Uh, I think that's how you move on, because I mean, uh, the fact of the matter is not. I mean, even whatever we do, as how much we condemn hatred, there's a lot of hatred in this world, and hatred against people, which ultimately causes uh, suffering, people getting killed. And the only way it can actually be removed is, as rightly pointed out by Rabbi Weissman, when he said that do not have hatred in your heart, never entertain it for your brother. And it's a very, very important thing that he mentioned was that such statements in the divine text are employed by religious people to mean that I should not have hatred against somebody who belongs to my own group. And he very rightly suggested that the definition of a brother, of the brother who is not to be hated, has to be expanded, has to be generalized. And I think he's rightly pointed out that it should include all humans.
Mm.
I mean, what a shame that there's so much of talk of animal rights, which is fine. I mean, animals do have lots of rights which really need to be respected, but humans don't have rights quite often, and it is because of the fact that there are enmities and therefore hatred, which is getting across. We are carrying from generations. So this part of the way of thinking of groups should be addressed. Um, I mean, before I move on to any other point, I just want this to be discussed somewhat, and I would want to say that you know, as I said earlier, individual hatred probably is less problematic as is collective hatred. I mean, eh, if I belong to a group and I say that, I have become wiser and I've chosen to forgive, to ignore. And there are going to come people from right and left telling me that, what do you mean? How can you do that? How can we forget and forgive and so on? So yes, I mean, there's a lot to think about, and what Rabbi Weissman has mentioned is something that I've noted and will read it again and think about more
You,
about it.
one of the things that made me afraid of this topic, I approached this topic with a certain amount of fear. One of the things I was really afraid of is, the history, if you know the kind of history of the early history of Judaism, begins with the conquering of the land, and there are all these tribes that are already living there, and they have there's a war against those tribes, and there's that region, the region is always full of conflict. Okay, that's sort of the way it is. And my expectation was that I was going to find all these verses, telling us, we should hate these people and hate these people and hate these people. And now I think, what am I going to do with that? And um, I, to my great surprise, I didn't find them. Right? I was sort of shocked, honestly. I was expecting to deal with that issue I was expecting to wrestle with that issue in a different way. And and I just didn't find the text to do that. What I found was a lot of enmity. I found that well, first of all, what I found is that very consistently it was our enemies that hate us. I didn't say that was that was suggested to be one of the reasons why they're enemies is because they hate us. but very little to say that we should be hating them back, which I thought that was strange, honestly. I was expecting to hear more of that because if you live in the world, of course you hear that all the time, right? Well, we have beef, so to speak, right? We have our problems with this group, so we're supposed to hate them. They did this to us, or they did this to us, and now we have to hate them. And how dare you say that we shouldn't hate them? Because that, it's our moral obligation to hate them. And I expected to see more support for that, and I just didn't see it, which is interesting. There were certainly plenty of cases where it says, okay, you have to go to war, you have to do this, you have to do that. But at no point saying, okay, that you have to hate these people, right? Even the ones you're going to war against, which was interesting. You think, okay, maybe it would be healthy, for me to hate the people I'm going to war against. Maybe there's a sort of reasonableness in that, but that wasn't even suggested either. And um, uh, this elevation of hate, from being something which we know is dangerous and bad for our moral health, to kind of the ultimate expression of religiosity, which it is for some people. And for some people, that's really how they express their religion, is
Yeah.
by hating one group or another. That's a huge leap. And I think that it's soul killing. And it's soul killing, but it's not just our individual soul, it's our collective soul, right? It makes us unable to really do the things that we're supposed to be doing in the world, right? And makes us neglect those things. How is it possible? We're so busy hating. Because I'm Jewish, I get a lot of messages from a lot of people, some of them being, hateful. And I tend to get a lot of hateful messages from one particular country. And in this country has some of the worst poverty problems in the world. And I always ask people, I say, how do you have time, right? How do you have time to hate my people, right? I wish you would spend as much time like dealing with your problems of poverty, and dealing with all of the social issues, the things which are really hurting your people, as you're spending on hating mine for no reason, because in no productive way. It's just not, and I think we spend a huge amount of time, and that becomes such a big part of religious identity, of who you hate. I think is very, 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 very damaging. I think it's especially because it damages our heart, and but also because it distracts us from doing anything useful, right? It distracts us from actually doing the things that God asks us to do. God asks us to take care of the most vulnerable in society. God asks us to take care of each other. God asks us, you know, to be able to really serve Him. And how are you going to be able to serve God when you're just when your heart is being, eaten away by this poison? I don't think that it's possible. So, uh,
Wow.
yeah,
Mm.
I wanted to end on a much more positive. The positive thing is, don't forget to subscribe and to like the video. It's
Mm.
important, and go out there and love each other. The only thing, Rav Kook once said uh, that the only solution to sinat chinam, to baseless hatred, is baseless love. But love always has a basis, right? Everybody is a human being, created by God, given a beautiful divine soul, um, and so there's never an excuse not to love.
Before
Oh,
I
thank
hand over to you, Dr. Lale, for your final words of wisdom, I would just mention, probably I'll be repeating myself, but I think, I just feel inclined to say that it's very heartening and encouraging to hear from Rabbi Weissman that when he read the text from this particular point of view, to his surprise, pleasant surprise, it turned out that there is no mention of encouragement given to people to hate. Now, what I would want to say from my perspective, honest statement, honesty, which really frustrates me as well, that there are verses from the Quran which are used by people to convince their fellow believers that it is part of their religious duty, religiosity, to hate others. I mean, I'm saying with all my honesty that you go to each one of them, and you will find that it is actually talking about some particular thing, particular individual, or a particular group who were doing something wrong, and the Almighty is criticizing them, and it cannot be generalized. And therefore, I'm really convinced, and I think one of the motivations that I have when I joined this discussion, which is turning out to be very useful and has always been very remarkable, is that together we can dispel these misunderstandings that get created because there are people out there who somehow bent upon proving that religion and religious text is requiring, expecting the believer to hate, which is most certainly not the case. The other last thing that I would mention is the reference to Joseph's story. I mean, it's a beautiful story. I mean, honestly, whenever I read it, I'm inspired. Particularly the mention of Joseph, as is mentioned in the Quran. He said to his brothers that, it was Satan who came between us and caused this misunderstanding. So he refused to blame them. Wow. I mean, it's amazing. He just refused to blame them. He said, well, it was Satan who became a reason for us to be divided. And, it is said that Prophet Muhammad, towards the last part of his mission, when there were people around him who were his enemies, and he had the privilege, the power, the authority to punish them. And the words he used were that I am going to say to you what my brother Joseph said to his brothers, that you carry no blame. I just forgive you. So I think, that is the spirit that needs to be revived. And over to you, Dr. Lale.
Oh, so beautiful. Thank you both so much. Honestly, these sessions just, I have to hold back the tears. They're sort of tears of just, yeah, you're both of you're sharing your wisdom, and it really touches my heart. So God bless you. I don't know what to say, really. I just thank you so much. And, I sometimes, I think obviously there is hatred. We see hatred in the world, but I wonder whether actually what we see is just an expression of fear. And whether actually, all of that hatred, comes from, it's not real, but perhaps it's actually just even the way we perceive it. Could that be, that's one question. And another question is sort of, where does this I think when my understanding is that the more we move away from reality, which really is just love, then the more we feel hatred in our hearts. And the reason is perhaps because of jealousy and greed, which all of that sort of comes from ego, and you know, thinking that we are better than someone else or more worthy than someone else. And you know, the feeling of the self-importance, and I think that's what causes division. That's what makes us feel like us and them, and that's when the hatred starts. It's like, because if there is no us and them, then we would only be us, you know, we would only be one. And I think what Rabbi Weissman said, and what you said as well, Dr. Zaheer, is that, you know, the more we see other people, whatever their race, religion, country they're from, you know, whatever, everybody's our brother, because we all come from one human being. The more we can do that and connect to our oneness, then the less likely it is there will be an us and them, and then the less likely it is that we will have, you know, our ego and have hatred in our hearts. But I think it starts with loving God, our creator, because he's our creator. He's my creator, your creator, everybody's creator. So if we love our creator and we see our creator within everybody that we encounter, and we accept that there is perhaps a will and a plan that it's higher than our own understanding, and that means, you know, getting rid of our ego and surrendering to a higher will, I think only then can we accept that. And when I say fear, what I mean is, I think people are afraid of the truth. So, and people therefore don't like the truth, they hate the truth. And sometimes the person who are closest to you, you know, tell you the truth, and the people, you know, I think every other person that's not ourselves has a truth that is going to be uncomfortable for us to be able to face. And I think people are afraid of that. Whereas if we can see it as fear, then perhaps we can address it better, and try to learn from every person that we meet, even if, you know, they have a different opinion, if they're from a different country or whatever, if they seem different. It's not a bad thing. It's just an opportunity to learn something about ourselves that we didn't know, like a higher truth. And yeah, so I don't know, that's just a point. But what would you, any comments about that? Or do you think hatred is actually real? Is it a real thing?
I mean, whatever you said is amazing, Dr. Lale, honestly. I mean, they're all very valid points. And quite often, hatred is based on points, ideas, feelings, which really are not real. I agree with you. And the solution you've mentioned is absolutely right. Let's talk more about it. Let's look at the other point of view. You know, let's continue to understand each other. I'm sure that if this is what is going to happen, there'll be no hatred. There'll be no, well, there are still going to be differences, but they will never become as sharp and acute as would make people hate each other. So, yeah, thank you very much for these comments. I agree with you.
God bless you both, and Alhamdulillah. And I'm so grateful to God, to both of you for this opportunity. So thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Okay, peace and blessings, everyone. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. Bye-bye. Oh, have I stopped recording? Have I stopped recording? Oh.